I guess I got the short straw. No, I'm just kidding. What an honor it is to be here with you all today, especially since I keep getting invited back and don't really realize, I guess, how what I have to say impacts you. But I do know that in telling my story, that I also heal. And so I thank you for opportunities to continue that journey, because it is a journey. I have been home from war since late May of 1991. As a matter of fact, I arrived home the day before Memorial Day, and my hometown commissioned a statue and used me as their person for a female veteran for the Gulf War. And so I came home and immediately had to speak at that event the day after I arrived in my hometown. And so I can kind of understand what was being talked about before, about the whirlwind of what's around you when you return home. But before I tell you about returning home, I should probably tell you a little bit about my service. I signed up for the Ohio Army National Guard. I grew up in Ohio, had been in college for 2 years, and I think my father had planted in my head, join the National Guard, because he knew he didn't have the money to send me to college, and I was like, oh no, Dad, I got this. And so for 2 years, I put myself through school, and by the end of my sophomore year, kind of working full-time and going to school full-time, the National Guard became my idea. And so I was like, Dad, guess what I'm gonna do? He's like, no way, I can't believe it. So I signed up to serve. That was in 1987 in peacetime. It wasn't a time when the National Guard had been called up to go to war. And so it seemed like a reasonable way to get my college education, serve 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and it'll be good. Well, you all know what came about. I graduated college in June of 1990. And the Tuesday before Thanksgiving in 1990, I received the call that said my report date was that Friday. So we had 4 days notice. I was married at the time, no children, and have to tell you that even though I was at my 2-week training when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, even though I knew I was in a water purification unit and was likely gonna go, you still aren't ready when you get that call. And during those wars, during that war, we, as I said, didn't get much notice. So I had to tell my employer I was gonna be gone till at least 180 days is what we were told. And say goodbye to my husband, write a will, do all of the things that you do, what I thought later, not at 24, I hadn't put all of those things in place yet because I thought I was gonna live forever. So we got all of those things in order and reported Friday, shipped out on Saturday to Fort Knox, Kentucky. And the day before Christmas was the day that I flew to Saudi Arabia. So, college graduate, feeling like I was ready to take on the world, and then suddenly the world was readjusting the plan that I thought that I had. So, my service time, like probably most females who serve, was mixed with a number of things. Many of you have probably heard females talk before and know that there is a lot of oftentimes military sexual trauma that happens for women. Between my service in basic training and my service back in my home unit, so basic training, Fort Belvoir, and my home unit, I had experienced sexual harassment. And so by the time I got back to Ohio, I was a mad college graduate who decided that that was not gonna be okay with me. So I had filed charges actually before we had left Ohio, and the investigation proved true. And so things had happened in my home unit that led people to think that maybe I was not the one to mess with when I got to Saudi Arabia. I was stationed with 12 other women. I can tell you that all 11 of the other women who I served with were sexually harassed. There were mirrors in showers. There were constant barrages of comments of a sexual nature that would make you feel demeaned and devalued. Some women were cornered occasionally and threatened for rape. Many of them eluded that, to my knowledge, although I will tell you, because it wasn't happening to me, they would come in constantly and tell me, and I would constantly reassure them what the process was. And there was a fear, and I think it's a very real fear, that the people that I'm serving with have to have my back. And so if they have to have my back and I press charges while we're here, that won't go well for me. And so the fear, I think, led to apathy for a lot of the women in my unit, and therefore no charges were filed, and we lived with the secrets of what was occurring while we served. It was very frustrating to me until one night I heard about the male latrine. We had 4-seater latrine. It was high class, no walls between them. And so you can imagine the space was fairly large, and inside the male latrine, word had gotten back to several of the females in our unit that there were all kinds of the same types of things being said about us on the walls of the latrine. I thought, well, maybe I'll be there since they won't do it to my face like they do to everyone else. So we went on a reconnaissance mission one night. I worked in the garage, so I had access to some good black spray paint. We took the spray paint and my camera. We took honey and Wheaties, and we took pictures of everything that was written on the walls, and then we spray painted them, threw the honey down on the toilet seats, attached a few Wheaties, and made our way back to our tent in silence, only to learn the next morning that unfortunately it was Sergeant Dawson who was the first into the latrine, probably the nicest, sweetest, grandfatherly sergeant I have ever worked with, who experienced the honey and Wheaties for the first time. However, he did understand and was very understanding towards us, that why we did what we did. But I got a call into the commander's tent the next morning and had reasonably gotten the film on a Humvee to the battalion to be mailed out so that it wasn't on me anymore, prior to the commander calling me. And so he called me in and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Sir, what are you talking about?" Of course, denial was my friend. And he said, "You guys are not getting away with this. All of you are going to sign in Article 15. And I said, "Oh, the whole unit? We're all signing in Article 15? Okay." And he said, "No, the women, you guys went in, you totally blacked out the bathroom, you put the honey and Wheaties on the seats, you're going to get an Article 15. And I said, "Sir, if the whole unit's getting an Article 15, I'll be happy to sign with them. But if we're not all in trouble, I don't think we're in trouble." And he looked at me and I said, "The pictures left this morning." So we were kind of done with that conversation. I was probably more than a little bit of a rebel in 1990, 91, when all of this was happening, and continued, I guess, to further my reputation of I don't want to stand by and allow this to happen, because in being silent and doing nothing, I allow it to continue to happen. I don't know where that woman came from. I just know that I've always felt like that was the type of person that I had to be, was to be true to who I am. And so I did that. When we came home, everything shifted quite a bit more. I did get along with the other men in my unit fine, because again, the only thing in the bathroom about me said Lisa played guitar. I had a guitar with me in Saudi Arabia that we sent over on the top of the pallet. It wasn't a lie. So I was like, oh, good. But every other female in my unit had terrible things, slander against them on the walls of that bathroom. As time went on and we made our approach home, that was probably the most difficult time that I experienced, I would say, until I realized that I was experiencing other difficulties quite a bit later. When I first came home, I remember being on that airplane flight and wondering, what my husband was going to think of the woman I am, what he was going to think of the woman I had become, and would he love me? I wrote that question to myself in my journal on the flight home, and really didn't know, because I wasn't sure I even liked the woman I had become while I served. I didn't like some things that I saw. I didn't like some things that I had to participate in, and I certainly doubted the mission that we had been on more than a couple of times. And so years later, as I have been running this retreat center for military families, where the kids and the adults all come together, we do some journaling. And so I hope it's okay, Rita. I wanted to share the one that I shared before, because I think it expresses this coming home. I wrote this almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. We had a spring break retreat and brought families to a camp in Ohio. And so I would just like to share this with you. We had a Vietnam veteran who was leading our journaling that weekend, or that week, and he gave us the prompt, "Only a clean wound can heal." Only a clean wound can heal, yet there are wounds that nobody saw, or so I thought. I remember that long flight home with an added 10 hours on the tarmac in Belgium, no getting off the plane, high security threats. I remember thinking, what if Sean doesn't love who I've become? What if my family doesn't love me as they used to? Then the burying began, trying to hide the bitch this girl had become. I was hardened, angry, mean, but now I was supposed to be sweet and fun-loving and caring. I just shoved that evil twin as deep within my soul as I could. If they never saw her, they would never know. What I did not recognize is that shoving down actually gave that darkest side of me power. It gave her the control. It is almost that feeling of eating so much you are going to be sick. How do you hide the vomit of your soul? It won't stay choked down forever. More like The Exorcist, it will erupt at the oddest moment. It will splash onto everything and everyone near me. It will drive them away if they're wise, but I pray it doesn't come up. It doesn't surface. What a laugh. My husband knew, not all the details, yet he saw it consume me. He saw that the more I tried to cover it, bury it, swallow it, the more I was angry, dark, and empty. He could watch, but he could only approach when I let the wall down. Why was I afraid of him? He loved me. He stayed. He wanted it to be better. He wanted to ease my pain. Share my burden. And I continued to fear, what if he can't love me? This led to the realization, what if I'm forcing or trying to force him not to love me? Because I don't begin to love that woman. Time is an amazing healer. I wrote that a year and a half ago. And as you see, time still makes its reality known to you. I also learned a job My husband and I only probably 8 months or a year ago were having dinner with some friends, and they were asking questions about the deployment, and then they were asking him how it felt to be home. And he said, it was hard. It's hard being the husband of Lisa, the one who went to war, the one who did all of this stuff, and I was a civilian and I stayed home. What did I do? I went to work every day. It wasn't until that conversation that evening that I even realized that part of who I became changed him too. So it is not an experience that I have regret, because I would not be the woman that I am today without those experiences. It's taught me so much. I love my country. I love my opportunity to serve. I know it can be better. I wish that for all of the women who follow me, that it becomes better for them, that there are less risks, less trauma, less mistrust, less having to look over your shoulder at the person who isn't the enemy, who is suddenly the enemy. One of my friends shared at a camp this summer, she shared, they did cardboard testimonies. And her cardboard testimony as a female veteran read, "I was not your enemy."